Hi everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. I just did a video on April 20th about how Harley Davidson did great with their first quarter earnings, but they just got hit with some really disastrous news, really, that the European Union had decided to eliminate some prior agreements for Harley Davidson to be able to sell motorcycles manufactured in non-US countries outside the European Union for a 6% tariff. And instead, now Harley Davidson will be hit with a 56% tariff as early as June if they don't win their appeal. So if you saw the title to this video, the European Union screwed Harley Davidson. Is that really the case, or did Harley Davidson screw themselves somehow? And the reason I asked that is, you can see here I'm wearing my souvenir shirt that I bought when I did a tour of the vehicle operations plant in Kansas City. I did that tour with my kids in early 2018. And then later in the year, Harley announced that they were closing that plant, which would result in the loss of about 800 factory jobs. And at the same time, they were moving to operations in Thailand. And the reason stated was to be able to sell bikes and not have huge tariffs imposed on them. So the idea was make Harley Davidsons in Thailand and then sell them in the European Union. Well, at the time, a lot of people were skeptical, and they thought that the real reason was Harley was just looking to outsource factory jobs out of the United States. In fact, if you look at the average, the minimum wage in Thailand is $10 a day. That's a day, which is about what minimum wage here is in the United States. So you have to ask yourself, did Harley Davidson really build a factory in Thailand in order to get lower tariff rates and not see the possibility that those tariffs might increase over time? I mean, what's the motive of the European Union? Are they trying to put Harley Davidson out of business? Some viewers on my recent videos suggested that maybe the European Union is nervous about the Pan America, and they're afraid that Harley Davidson will take market share of the adventure touring market from the likes of BMW and KTM and even Ducati. We're talking about tariff rates right now. 6% is kind of high to begin with. 56% is outrageous. What would you guess the tariff rate is for KTM, BMW, or Ducati coming from Europe, manufactured in Europe and coming to the United States? The answer is, for a bike that's over 801 cc's, it's 2.4%. So why is the tariff so low on European bikes, and it's already high at 6%, and it's impossibly high at 56%? Now, some of you will say, hey, Harley deserves some of its own medicine because didn't they get the government to slap tariffs on Japanese motorcycles back in the 80s? And it's true. From, say, 83 to 87, Harley Davidson had petitioned the Reagan administration to impose tariffs on Japanese motorcycles. And some of those tariffs could be as high as 49% for the over 600 cc class motorcycles. But the other thing that was going on back in the 80s is the Japanese manufacturers truly were dumping motorcycles in the United States. I mean, say what you will, but I can remember, I was buying motorcycles at this time. I can remember in 1987, you could go to a motorcycle dealer, and on the showroom floor were brand new Yamahas, as an example. I think Yamaha and Suzuki were the worst culprits in this, as I recall. The Yamaha for sure, but you could find like an 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87 Yamaha Virago, all brand new, unsold, sitting on the showroom floor. In fact, as I recall, I bought a 920 Yamaha Virago for $2,500, and it included the tariffs in it. So it was starting out even lower originally. And at the time in 87, as I recall, an 883 Sportster was around $4,000. So I think it's a slightly different situation. I'm not a fan of tariffs at all, but if one country has them, doesn't it seem appropriate that they at least match on tariff rates? I mean, I've been exposed to this, say, in Vietnam. I went to a Ducati dealership in Saigon a few years ago. I think it was 2016 or 2017. And they had two brand new X Diavol S's sitting side by side. One was made in Italy, and it was $50,000 because it's a $25,000 bike roughly. And in Vietnam, they impose 100% tariff on manufactured goods outside of the country. And those tariffs are lower if they come from other Southeast Asian countries. So they had one made in Italy and the other was made in Thailand. And the one in Thailand was selling for the mid, it was around $25,000, $26,000. So the tariffs, if there were any, were quite low. You know, I don't know why anyone would want to distinguish between a Ducati made in Italy versus one made in Thailand. I would suppose that the one in Italy would be preferred. But anyway, it was interesting to me that they have this tariff situation. I mean, countries like Vietnam, they don't allow the importation of used goods. And new goods are subject to 100% tariff. So next time you go to your closet, look at how many clothes are made in Vietnam. And think to yourself, if anybody makes a shirt in the US and sends it in Vietnam, it's gonna be subject to 100% tariff. So, you know, what's the end game of the European Union? Is this just a bargaining chip to try and get concessions on some other type of trade agreement? I mean, my view of trade is, and these tariffs is, you know, you can't complain that it's not fair. I mean, life isn't fair. It's about pure power and what one country can get away with and what another country is going to tolerate. And I think for a long time, the United States tolerated these protectionist trade policies during a time when both Japan and Europe were rebuilding post-World War II. And then we allowed it to other developing countries, to occur in other developing countries, because we saw a benefit for them to develop and become a stable and democratic and being a good trading partner and all this other stuff. But how did it get to the point now where Harley Davidson can't manufacture a motorcycle anywhere outside the European Union without it being subject to a 56% tax? I mean, it's outrageous. And, you know, Harley Davidson's going to unleash their lawyers. They're probably flying to Brussels as we speak. And I'm sure they're going to impose on the current U.S. administration to try and intercede on their behalf. I wouldn't hold out much hope that anything's going to happen there, just personally speaking. But, you know, Harley Davidson sold through 2020, the year 2020, they sold around 37,000 motorcycles in the European Union. Per their latest financials, their percentage of the 601 and over cc market in Europe went down from about 7.2% the end of 2020 to around 3.9% the end of this last first quarter. So they took a big hit there, but mostly due to supply chain disruptions and a deliberate cut in production. So if you just ask yourself, well, if Harley in a good year accounts for about 7% of the heavyweight motorcycle segment in Europe, what's the European Union afraid of? Well, I mean, it's not like Harley's flooding the market with bikes. So, you know, I'm curious what you all think should be done about this. Is a good starting point to have whatever tariff they put on our bikes be the same for any bike that comes from the European Union? I mean, that hurts motorcycling, but I just don't see how Harley Davidson should be subjected to that type of high tariff. But again, what was Harley thinking by opening up a plant in Thailand? Were they hoping to manufacture bikes and get them into Japan and China and other Asian markets? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like it was mostly a play to get bikes made cheaper into the European market without being subject to huge tariffs. I mean, going back to that example of that Ducati in Vietnam, there are extremely wealthy individuals in Vietnam. There's just not many of them. So even if a Harley had a 56% tax on it that made it that much more expensive, there'll be a few people that'll still buy a Harley Davidson. There just won't be 37,000 of them like there were in 2020. So Harley as a company can't afford to completely abandon the European market. They've pulled out of 39 other international markets already in the last year. So it's not like they could fire up the plant in Thailand and instead of selling bikes to Europe, they can sell them to other countries because they've pulled out of those markets. It's not like most American customers are going to want to buy a Harley that was made in Thailand. I mean, most of us won't. So Harley's between a rock and a hard place here. And I guess my question really is, from a management standpoint, didn't they see this coming? I mean, trade policy changes from year to year. What's their backup plan? What are they going to do if they go to the current administration and the administration can't effectively go to bat for them? You know, Harley's going to say, oh well, we tried everything we could. You're going to expect people to spend another, on average, you take a Harley that's probably on average $20,000 bike, if you include all models in Europe. So it's going to be over 30,000. That's a huge hit. Consumers aren't going to absorb that. Harley can't absorb that. So do they scale production even more? I mean, in 2020, their total production was 143,000 motorcycles. Do they go down to 100,000 and focus primarily on the United States, Canada, and Australia? This isn't a good development at all, obviously. And I'm curious to see what your thoughts are about this. So please let me know in the comments section. I guess in this video, I've had a lot more questions than answers. I just know the big picture is, if you just look at the timeline, Harley says, we're going to open up a plant in Thailand. We got to do something about these tariffs. We can't be competitive in Europe unless we have a plant in Thailand. There's not enough demand to keep a plant going in Kansas City, even though they got huge, millions of dollars of tax breaks. They sold that plant, or they were trying to, last I heard, for around $26 million. The paint booth alone in that plant was worth $30 million. So I can understand if the demand is down and the production's down, they might have to shift production from one U.S. plant to, say, York, Pennsylvania. But using this tariff business as an excuse to really ramp up in Thailand, and now they're getting hit with an untenable tariff situation, doesn't seem like a very well thought out strategy. And I really don't know how this is going to play out for them. So again, please let me know what you think in the comments section and stay tuned for future videos. Thanks very much.